Imagine a peaceful coastal village at dawn, its inhabitants unaware that within hours they will be uprooted, herded into boats, and carried away to bondage far across the sea. Such was the grim reality of many pirate raids during the early modern period, when maritime raiders struck not only merchant ships, but entire communities, seizing men, women, and children alike. One of the most dramatic examples occurred on 17th May 1683, when the pirate leaders Lawrence de Graaf and Nicholas van Horn attacked the Spanish port town of Veracruz in New Spain. Their force, some 5 vessels plus several smaller craft, captured the town's fortifications and forced its population into churches, denying them food and water for days. Numerous women were subjected to mistreatment, and many people were taken as hostages. According to one account, they rounded up over 6,000 local citizens for ransom and sale. Across the Atlantic, the so-called Turkish abductions illustrate the reach of North African corsairs. In June 1627, a fleet of Barbary pirates landed on the Westman Islands off Iceland and carried off 242 islanders, including women, children, and the elderly. Similarly, on the summer of 1629, 3 ships of Barbary pirates attacked Sutheroy in the Faroe Islands and abducted over 30 women and children, while some were killed in the course of the raid. These raids often targeted coastal settlements that lacked adequate defenses. For instance, on 19th–20th June 1631, the raid known as the Sack of Baltimore in West Cork, Ireland, saw more than 100 men, women, and children seized by corsairs under the command of Murat Rais the Younger. Very few of the captives were ever heard from again. The scale of the phenomenon was substantial. Research indicates that from about 1500 to 1780, more than 1 million Europeans, men, women, and children, may have been taken by North African pirates and sold into forced labor or captivity. In the context of these raids, women often faced multiple layers of vulnerability. They might be separated from family, held as hostages, or sold into concubinage, offered as bargaining chips for ransom, or exploited in slave markets. Historically recorded codes from the Chinese Pirate Confederation, led by Zheng Yi Sao, illustrate one of the few documented systems. In her fleet's code, it is stated that the only way in which a pirate could legitimately form a relationship with a female captive was by marriage, in which case he was obliged to be loyal to her. No improper intimate activities were supposed to occur. That formulation, however, did not represent a consensual contract in the modern sense. In practice, many women seized in raids had no meaningful choice. The pirate commander held power over their status, and the marriage served first and foremost to validate the commander's claim over the woman, to symbolically transform her from captive into property wife, and to regulate crew behavior. In Western maritime contexts, while the formal institution of forced marriage to pirate captains is less directly documented, the principle of marriage to cement domination or control over captives does appear. For example, women captured by Mediterranean corsairs could find themselves presented in the household of a commander or local official under a claim of marriage, though the reality was more akin to concubinage and coercion. Moreover, the uniform pirate articles of Caribbean buccaneers seldom included references to captive marriages, reflecting perhaps a less codified arrangement. But the underlying power dynamic was similar. Captors using marriage as a means of social control. Thus, forced marriage in the pirate context functioned as a dual mechanism, socially legitimizing the captor's claim over a woman and enforcing discipline among the crew. The effect for the women involved was profound. Stripped of agency, They were entwined in a system of violence and subjugation under the guise of matrimony. Captivity in below-deck confinement. When coastal or maritime raids culminated in the seizure of women, the ordeal did not end at capture. Instead, for many women, the next stage was forced confinement, below deck or in makeshift prison spaces aboard pirate or corsair vessels, an ordeal of physical, psychological, and social subjugation. One documented case involves Elizabeth Marsh, a young Englishwoman whose ship was taken by Moroccan corsairs in August 1756. She recounts how, after capture, she was transported first to the pirate base at Salé and then onwards, describing the moment. It was thought more prudent to wait for them than, by trying to escape, run a risk of being put to death if they should attack us, for they were well armed and very numerous. Though Marsh's captivity narrative largely emphasizes her later negotiation and survival tactics, it nonetheless points to a period of containment and extreme vulnerability immediately following seizure. In the Mediterranean and North African context, the so-called Barbary system included the capture of persons who were then held in slave markets or on corsair ships. Researchers note that women were subject not only to ransom or sale, but to confinement in conditions where their movement was restricted and their autonomy eliminated. Pirates and corsairs often carried off captives aboard ships ill-equipped for prolonged human transport. Holds designed for cargo or for male prisoners were then repurposed for women, children, and the elderly, in cramped and unsanitary conditions. While much of the spotlight falls on the forced labor or sale of captives, the below-deck confinement phase must be seen as a distinct stage. Here, women were rendered into human cargo, removed from any protective community or family structure, and left biologically and socially exposed. The physical space, a dark hold beneath the deck with little light, fresh air, or privacy, became a liminal zone between the moment of capture and whatever fate the captor decreed, whether that was sale, forced marriage, concubinage, or prolonged servitude. Trade of women to local warlords. In the wake of maritime raids and ship captures, many women seized by pirate or corsair forces found themselves not simply held, but transferred into systems of trade, sold or bestowed to powerful individuals such as local warlords, sultans, and governors. A striking example is Helen Gloag, a young Scottish woman captured in 1750. After her ship was overtaken by Moroccan corsairs, Gloag was sold to a wealthy Moroccan and subsequently presented to the Sultan Sidi Mohammed ben Abdallah, becoming his consort and eventually one of his principal wives. In her story, the trade of a female captive transformed into a political household arrangement. A captive turned into a possession of considerable value to a warlord ruler. Similarly, in the broader structure of the Barbary trade, capture did not always lead directly to ransom or release. Many women were placed in female slave bazaars, such as the Avret Pazarları in Istanbul, though that location lies somewhat outside the North African corsair context, where female captives, often from European or other regions, were sold into domestic servitude or concubinage by Muslim elites. Thus, the trade in captured women functioned as part of a larger system of captive commerce, where women were treated as chattel, valuable both financially and socially to local rulers. What this meant for the women caught up in it was profound. They were uprooted from their homes, transported across seas, and then parceled out to new owners who wielded legal, economic, and personal control over them. The transition from ship raid to market trade signified a shift from immediate physical danger to protracted structural bondage, where being traded to a warlord or elite meant lifelong status as a captive person, often with no realistic prospect of freedom or return. Moreover, the trade into elite households amplified vulnerabilities. Women became part of power networks in which they were both assets and liabilities, subject to conversion pressures, manipulation, and forced assimilation into new cultural and religious frameworks. The ravages inflicted by pirate raids on women reveal more than isolated acts of cruelty. They demonstrate how entire communities could be uprooted, how power was weaponized through violence, and how the fates of women became a ledger in the global systems of plunder and trade. When fragile coastal communities were shattered, the capture, forced servitude, and commodification of women became a hinge on which power dynamics and empires turned, leaving scars not only on individuals, but on the fabric of civilization itself. History teaches that these episodes are not remote curiosities of the past, but echoes that continue to challenge our understanding of freedom, human dignity, and the cost of warfare. What must we learn from the women whose lives were reduced to bargaining chips in the pirate's ledger? Comment below. They never simply survived, they bore witness, and through their suffering, the world was reshaped.